To the red country and part of the gray country of Oklahoma, the last rains came gently, and they did not cut the scarred earth. The plows crossed and recrossed the rivulet marks. The last trains lifted the corn quickly and scattered weed colonies and grass along the sides of the roads, so that the gray country and the dark red country began to disappear under a green cover. In the last part of May the sky grew pale, and the clouds that had hung in high puffs for so long in the spring were dissipated. The sun flared down on the growing corn day after day until a line of brown spread along the edge of each green bayonet. The clouds appeared and went away, and in a while they did not try any more. The weeds grew darker green to protect themselves, and they did not spread any more. The surface of the earth crusted, a thin, hard crust, and as the sky became pale, so the earth became pale, pink in the red country and white in the gray country. And this is from The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, an incredibly famous book. And I'm sure many people have read it. This is from page 1, chapter 1, and if you've read this book, you know that basically every other chapter is a kind of a bird's eye view description of what's going on. And the other chapters are following the family that this book follows. As they travel across the United States and attempt to find work in California eventually. And things happen along the way, and so on and so forth. And those people include Tom, May, Casey, which I believe is... I can't remember. You see the preacher? Maybe. Yeah, and it just continues that way. Grandpa, Pa, Ma, Grandma, some other brothers and sisters. They all... Oh yeah, Uncle John, Noah, Connie, Rose of Sharon, right, okay. Okay, all of these characters are one big family that go from Oklahoma to California. And that is every other chapter, and every other chapter is like this God's view, bird's eye view, narration of what's kind of going on generally. And it creates kind of a metaphorical scene for each successive chapter. And this is called contrapuntal writing. It comes the same thing as contrapuntal melody in music. So you have two opposing melodies going on at the same time that kind of interact. It's the same thing in this, except with words you can't really put them together at the exact same time. That's the beauty of music. But in effect, that's what's going on. There's like two different motifs. There's the narrative, and then there's just like the painting of words. And this is definitely that painting of words thing going on here. And I love this. I loved all of the painting with words in this book. So I liked half the book. The other half, where it follows the family and all of that, I was just kind of bored and not really invested. I never became invested in the family. And I don't know, I mean, it's not because I'm like not empathetic with their situation. It's more just how the story was told, and the way John Steinbeck chose to write those characters and the dialogue. There's just a lot of dialogue, and it seems to go nowhere, and a lot of circles, and I just get really bored with that. So I really enjoyed half the book. And it's not really even half, because most of it is the dialogue and stuff. So maybe a third. But every other chapter I enjoyed. But what I really like about this opening is everything is done in twos, in pairs. It describes the pairs of things Actions take place in pairs. There's always two colors that come in pairs. Everything is a pair. Every sentence has a pair. So let's look at that closely. To the red country and the gray country. There's a pair of countries, right? The last rains came gently, and they did not cut the scarred earth. Okay. The plows crossed and recrossed. It's that these oppositions, these pairs, the rivulet marks. The last rains lifted the corn quickly and scattered weed colonies and grass along the sides of the roads, so that the gray country and the dark red country began to disappear under a green cover. All right. In the last part of May, the sky grew pale, and then the clouds that had hung in the high puffs for so long in the spring were dissipated. The sun flared down on the growing corn day after day until a line of brown spread along each edge of green bayonet. So that brown and green, the pale sky, the high puffy clouds. All this is coming and going, right? It's the rhythm of farming is what's being described here, of course, because in the wintertime you're going to have just hard earth, and it might look gray and it might look red depending on the clay or the soil that's being used. And you can imagine farm country where it's just long, flat, straight lines along fence lines, with one pasture and another pasture next to it. It's like this checkerboard pattern, and that's what's being described here. But it comes in pairs. Everything comes in pairs, and this pair thing can be a metaphor for so much. It can be about the people in the book. That are in opposition to one another. Okay, the weather seems to be in opposition to the next farm season here, but there's also the opposition towards the Jode family, from people who are not farmers, people who live in California and don't want people immigrating from the eastern part of the United States into California and taking their jobs and making everything, scab work is what it's called, lowering wages. So there's opposition between the people in the book, which was a real thing. Obviously, this is based on real life events, the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma and other parts of the Midwest in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, which compounded so much. And so that opposition is portrayed in the way the words are painted here, right? And all these pairs and these oppositions create a lot of symmetry, and that's a great way to paint with words. Symmetry, right? You're always trying to find the symmetry in literary works, because that's what creates, well, that's not the only thing that creates, but it's one of the main things that creates beauty. And when you read it, you don't necessarily notice it unless you take the time to look at it and examine it. But that's part of the reason it works on an intuition level, like a subliminal level. The symmetry just plays off the things our brains enjoy, right? So our brains enjoy symmetry because it creates patterns, and our brains are always seeking patterns because that's how you survive. You have to find patterns in the chaos of nature to survive. And it's the same thing in art. We have to create symmetry as artists in order to engage our fans, our appreciators, our intended audience, right? If there's no symmetry, there's no audience. It comes down in many ways to that. There's obviously a lot of books that are asymmetrical, and a lot of art that's asymmetrical. But it is definitely important to gain a wider audience. Let's keep going with this. The clouds appeared and went away, another pair, and in a while they did not try anymore. The weeds grew darker green to protect themselves. They did one thing, and they did another thing. They dared not spread any more. The surface of the earth crusted, a thin hard crust. Okay, A, B, the sky became pale. So the earth became pale. Pink in the red country, white in the gray country. What's the pale version of red? Pink. What's the pale version of gray? White. Right? There's a lot of colors being used in this passage. Not a lot. It's green. It's green. It's gray. It's pink, red, white. I don't even think it says blue, which is, something you would expect to see when you talk about the sky. So it avoided using blue, and it really just focuses on those colors. So it creates not only symmetry, but it also creates a palette in the choice of colors it's going to use. All right? You can almost think like John Steinbeck is an artist painting on a canvas, and he didn't want to use certain colors, even though he's going to try to simulate nature. He stuck to certain colors, and that's what he's sticking with. And so that's what he did. That's what his painting accomplished. Right, I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into this. But that's essentially what's going on. There's a lot of symmetry and color choices here that create a scene, an image, right? It's just describing what happens, or what happened at the beginning of the Dust Bowl, right? Essentially, a drought came, and then all of that eroded earth that wasn't growing crops anymore got whipped up into the sky by wind and carried all over the states in the Midwest, destroying other farms. And so all of those people lost their farms. At the same time, tractors became more important, and a lot of corporate farming started to begin then, and that kind of pushed a lot of people out. That's what this book really gets into. And so it's that corporation, it's that other, it's that evilness, it's the they that people always use, when they talk about things that are abstract and not exactly real. It's always that they, those things over there. It's that opposition between the people on the ground being affected most poignantly, and then those others, they out there who are causing it all. Whether it be government, technology, corporations, other people, systems, okay, is that thing. And it's all right here in this first paragraph. Of course, you have to read into it a bit, but that's what literature is about. So, John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. Give it a read. Take care.